Hi guys. Dude, every time I start, I swear. Like every Oh my god, bro. It's 11 April 2026, 10 o'clock. Every time I start, I always forget what day it is, and then I'm like, bro, I have to go check. It's insane, bro. It's insane. Um, I think people are fake as hell. Low curriculum. Yeah. Dude, so like, I don't know, bro. I feel like people, a lot of, or like specifically this, like, I guess, generation, a lot of people are like kind of alone or lonely, and I think it's kind of hypocritical because a lot of these people are like, yeah, I can't make friends, I don't know how to make friends or whatever. And it's like, dude, you don't, okay, first of all, you're not trying to make friends, and then second of all, you're not really putting yourself out there. So like, I don't know, I was talking to this person online, and they're like, I don't know if they were asking for friends or whatever, but it was just kind of like, oh yeah, uh I don't know. Uh, and it's just like, dude, like, in order to actually have a connection with someone, you have to put in work, you have to actually stick out for them for the long haul, if that makes sense. So you can't just expect things to take off instantly, you know what I mean? Like, things kind of take time. So actually having a real friendship, or even with like relationships as well, it's not gonna happen in a few days or weeks or months, this kind of thing takes years. And I feel like people kind of have this interpretation where you're expecting these friendships and relationships to just kick off automatically. And that's just not how it works, because in order to actually know somebody, it takes time. And how do you fully know somebody? You take the time, you know what I mean? Like, you actually have to stick out and work towards it. You kind of can't just let things like fall into place and expect it to all work out. So I think a big proponent is a lot of people nowadays don't really understand that, and so they don't really try to push forward and actually maintain a friendship. And I think the crucial area is also as soon as it starts or when it begins. Because mind you, this is when you guys are starting to know each other and getting to learn about each other. So if you can't really stick out during this essential time, nothing's gonna happen, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people just don't really like, just people want things to come by fast, and they just expect things to be easy and just happen for them, but it's like it's just it's such a good saying, but like, all good things in life take time, and it's usually hard. It's not going to be easy. And that is exactly why it works so well and why it lasts so long, because, it actually took time to build up. It's kind of like, if you're building a skyscraper, for example, you don't want to rush the foundation, because if you rush it, well, what's going to happen next? Eventually you're going to have a building that just completely falls apart. And what was it for? Nothing, because you didn't actually take the time to really have it grounded and actually solidify it. So I think a lot of people have these like meaningless and very pointless friendships, and they don't really mean anything. But in the moment, it's cool because it's like, oh, well, at least I'm not alone or whatever. But it's like, dude, your friendship is fake. You just have to wait till it gets tested, and then you'll see. And obviously, by then, it's too late. But, and this is another thing as well, is like, you have to have test. If you don't have test in a friendship or a relationship, it just you're bound to fail unless you're extremely lucky, which I mean, I would say that's like 1%, where like, you actually have a case where both people are genuine. Like, I feel like that's super lucky. Yeah. I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean, life goes on. I also feel like people are super boring. Like, you kind of, I don't know, you like kind of reveal your colors or basically kind of just show who you are, and people get intimidated by that. And I feel like a lot of the time it's kind of like not really intimidation, but more so like a fearfulness because they don't want to reveal themselves and they see someone who's actually being themselves. And like, it's kind of similar to like, you see someone working hard, you're not gonna, I don't know, like it's not obviously for everybody, but some people it's like you see someone working hard and you just kind of get like intimidated by it and almost start to get mad at them. And I feel like the same way goes for just like, I already lost my train of thought. For like people and just, I don't know, like I feel like nowadays people are just very shallow and surface level, and then they complain about how people are like shallow as well in a way. I don't know. I feel like this is kind of contradictory, but basically, like people nowadays, they don't really surely true themselves. I can't fucking speak. They can't really show who they are, and when they actually see someone who does show who they are, they're instantly judgmental or like criticizing them or something like that. So it's very hypocritical. And I think a lot of things in this generation are very hypocritical. Not even necessarily with just like relationships or showing colors or whatever, but just like the values and morals as well. Because a lot of the time, I feel like people, they'll claim they want this, they claim they will do this, and then they're actually presented and they don't do it. And I think a lot of this kind of ties in with what I was saying, I think, yesterday, but with this whole suffering thing, is, if you don't have that suffering, you're not going to really understand how important your values are. You're also not going to know what your values are to begin with if you don't have that suffering in place to, kind of ground yourself. So I feel like a lot of people just don't have that, and so they end up growing in this false narrative of like, of having these expectations, and it's like you can't even have that expectation because you don't even fully support it. You know what I mean? Like you kind of believe you do, but you don't really. It's kind of like with all the protests and other stuff that was happening was like, you guys are following a trend. Like, yeah, you say you're standing up for it, whatever, and it's like cool and all, but like, where's the work? Where are you actually like, going out of your way to protest every single day and actually putting in the time and effort, not just like showing up with a sign and be like, yeah, and then posting something random on Instagram about it. Like, dude, that's not, everybody can do that. That's not actual work. You gotta put actual effort to show that you really care. So I feel like a lot of people in society are very hypocritical. And it's also just like a lack of accountability. Because, I mean, I don't know, a lot of people think, everyone thinks they're correct. So obviously it's kind of hard to come down to a specific conclusion with everyone. But I don't know. I think a lot of people don't understand that their own mind can lie to them, and that concept kind of just eludes them completely. And instead of questioning deeper and going deeper within, and maybe trying to articulate exactly why they feel the way they feel and um, how it got to that point, I think a lot of times people just rather settle with, just kind of like just a very like surface level concept of it. And that's kind of what you see with all these protests and stuff like that. Is like you have a very surface level, I idea, I guess, or understanding of what you're fighting for, but you don't actually truly know what you're fighting for, if that makes sense. Because like you're it's pursuing this like I don't know, dude. It's like you're pursuing this idea or this concept, but you're not really fighting for it. Someone just drifted outside. I don't know. I think the biggest virtue is compassion, and I think you gain compassion by suffering, extreme levels of suffering, honestly. And I think that's probably the greatest virtue because you don't want others to go through that, so you're willing to guide or help others in seeing their own flaws, but also not necessarily forcing it because you believe it's correct. So it's kind of hard because you have to balance out these things where, you're not doing it in a biased way, but you're also not doing it in a way where you're forcing it onto others. But at the same time, people can be stubborn in their own beliefs, which is very normal. However, when it is a damaging belief, it's kind of like it becomes its own like entrapment basically, and you get stuck in this like cycle of trying to get out, but then also complaining about either people who did get out or the actual process to get out. And then you end up complaining and then staying in the cycle and then complaining about why you're in the cycle. And it goes on. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, it's just not good. And you really see that with just people complaining about, oh, how alone they are and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, if you would take the time to really understand the current narrative that you're surrounded by, I guarantee you, you would actually be able to figure out a way to find someone or to, develop a connection with somebody, but you're not really taking the time to truly understand. Because how are you going to fix something if you don't truly understand it? You know what I mean? Like, you can't fix something you don't even know or recognize. So, how can you expect to fix an issue that is, affecting you so deeply? I don't know.